Welcome back, pod people. Today, my guest is Samuel Morrison, the writer and producer of By Deception, a twisty little psychological thriller that I really enjoyed. This month, I'm sort of doing a thematically connected double feature in that both of the movies that I'm going to be interviewing people about really reminded me of each other, and they both reminded me of the same classic film. And before I say what that is, I want to remind you that this is a full spoilers podcast. So if you're interested in going into this movie without having the ending and sort of the general thing that's going on spoiled for you, and it is a bit of a mystery, I recommend that you stop listening now and instead go watch By Deception. You can watch it on Tubi right now for free. Now that I've given you that opportunity, the classic film that this reminds me of is Gaslight. And I think once you've seen the movie, it's pretty clear why it reminds me of that. It is about our central point of view character being deliberately misled about his perceptions and trying to trick him into thinking that he's doing things that he's not, and that he can't trust his own memory. So thinking about this in contrast with Gaslight, I think one of the largest differences is that in Gaslight, we see a lot of the other characters, and it's very clear the entire time that the husband is gaslighting the wife and that she is not actually crazy. Whereas in By Deception, it's actually pretty ambiguous for most of the movie what's really going on. So I was wondering if you could talk a bit about your decisions when writing this to sort of restrict the viewer very much to the main character's perspective.
Well, first and foremost, Tom, thanks for having me on the podcast. I definitely appreciate that. I wish we probably would have did this when we first premiered, because that intro and comparison, I'll let you know the next time we release a film.
Yes, absolutely. Please do reach out to me the next time you've got a movie coming out.
You have me ready to rewatch the film that I already watched millions of times. The interesting aspect of a lot of things, especially when it comes to By Deception or just filmmaking in whole, I think when the audience sees a final product, they believe like everything or every decision that was made was intentional. And throughout this whole process, it wasn't. We shot this at the cusp of, COVID in 2020, like March 2020. So when it lockdown happened, I had a bunch of strangers like literally quarantined and living in my house.
How long was the shoot?
The shoot was 12. It was scheduled for 12 days, but we actually shot it in 11 days.
Okay.
And the reason why it was shot in 11 days is because the initial lead actress, we had to replace her. So that switch, it wasn't intentional.
Was that the Ava character?
Yes, it was Ava. That was, hey, I may have to go to Japan for audition. So can you hold the spot and we refilm when I come? I'm like, hey, I don't know what's going on in the world right now, but I know Japan isn't the place to go. And if you leave this house, you can't come back in.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that would have caused a huge delay.
Exactly. So we had, and there was no, we was a micro budget film. There were no delays. It was, the wife gave me a permission slip. You have 12 days to film this film. Whatever you do in 12 days, cool. But after that, get everybody out. So that's exactly what we had to do. So after day 3, we actually had to replace, our lead actress. So everything was being done on the fly. Like, it was that when I said we had 12 days, but we shot it in 11 days, is because one of those day 4, we had to sit down and figure out like where we were going to take the story. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, we had to figure out like where we were going to, take day 4 at.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think you're absolutely right that a lot of people who have never made a movie or don't know much about the movie making process think that every little detail is meticulously planned out. And I'm sure for some directors, especially really big budget ones, that's true. But for most, and especially for lower budget ones, which are all the ones that we talk about on this show, uh, no, there's a lot of improvisation, a lot of trying to figure out how to solve an unexpected problem on the fly. So that's really interesting. I definitely would not have guessed that you had that sudden change up a third of the way into shooting.
Yeah, yeah, and that was the scary part, you know. But just in general, I live in like controlled chaos. So in my, you know what I mean, philosophy when it comes to film is something's gonna happen. You just have to be prepared, you know. Um,
Yeah.
and like I said, whether it was like the lead actress that we had to recast the day before, whether it was like small parts that were dropping out the day before that we had to like, I
Mm,
stayed up until like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, you know, like recasting certain roles because, you know, we were in COVID and that was
yeah.
the time where nobody knew what COVID was. It was like, oh, it's mutating and people are dying as soon as you talk. And it was like, yeah, we can't watch the news anymore. Can we just like finish this film? And it was a lot because you know you have people trying to make entertainment and there's real world problems going on. So it was a lot
Yeah.
to battle with, but you know, I'm really happy that, you know, we saw it through. And it was very easy to just say, hey, we're gonna stop this and revisit it. And you know, if that happens 9 times out of 10, it probably would never been completed. So I definitely want to like, you know, commend my wife. She kind of gave me that extra push because I was trying to cancel the film, but she was like, "Hey, put your big
Mhm.
boy pants on, and finish it up." So that's what we end up doing.
That's great. Yeah, if I didn't know when the movie was made, if you told me like, oh, we shot this in 2012 or something, I would have believed you. There's nothing in it that like screams this was shot during COVID the way that a lot of other films that make use of like video calls like we're having right now, for instance. Um, so did you shoot the film in order or based on
Yeah,
which scenes were convenient?
we uh we shot some of it sequentially, and we pretty much like picked our spots. A lot of the scheduling was based on individuals that we had access to, just what their scheduling looked like.
That makes sense.
While we did have a bulk of people, like I said, you know, staying in the house, we did probably have like 3 or 4 roles that they had to like come in on certain days. But for the most
Hmm.
part, like yeah, we did shoot it, you know, in order.
Okay. Um, yeah, the reason I was asking about that is because most of Ava's scenes, as I recall, are near like the beginning and the end of the movie. And so if you had to recast her, if you had been shooting entirely in order, then I would imagine that you would have to reshoot a bunch of the beginning of the film, which would be really annoying, I imagine.
And that was the that's why we had like that perfect spot to kind of do the switch because that was the discussion like, hey, do we want to reshoot these film like these scenes, and just have, you know, one character? But it was like you said, it was a third way through. We already had a good chunk of it, so we just made the decision to, you know, flip it and then blame it on a dream at the end or a concussion, I would say.
Yeah, yeah, those yeah, that did the very end, the final shot of the movie made me curious. Was there a specific way that I was supposed to interpret that, or was it deliberately ambiguous? Or
It was both, you
okay,
know, and I think that's why we wanted to play into the psychological situation of it. You know,
yeah,
throughout the movie, we had you thinking that, you know, this is reality. Then we flip it where you think, oh, okay, this was, you know, a fever dream, a concussed situation. But what would happen if something that you thought was entirely fictional or like, you know, based on a dream, but you've seen a remnants of that in reality? Is this still reality? Or, you know, are you in a dream? So it's one of those things where, you know, it's open to your interpretation to decide what you feel, you know, is the best conclusion to make you digest the movie easier.
Yeah, yeah, and in that regard, the other movie that it reminded me of is um, In the Mouth of Madness,
Okay.
which have you seen that one?
I haven't seen that one.
Oh, okay. It's really good. It's another classic from I want to say the late 80s, early 90s, starring Sam Neill. Uh, it's also about sort of like an author and difficulty telling what's fictional and what's reality. Um, so definitely worth checking out. Uh, and the other movie that I'm going to be interviewing somebody about that your two movies struck me as very similar to each other in a lot of ways is called Exposure, and that one's not out yet. Um, but once it comes out, I think you're going to enjoy it.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to, you know, keep me updated. Do you know when it's going to be released?
I believe it's going to be released later this year, but I'm not certain. I got sent a screener link for it, so it's not yet. I don't believe it's yet publicly available. And unfortunately, with these one-word titles, there are several movies that have that title, including ones that have come out recently. But the one in particular that is currently unreleased. So because so much of By Deception follows the main character's point of view, and it's very centered around this character, um, the lead performance is really important, and the main actor really carries it. He does a great job of selling the character's emotional state and confusion and determination. I thought it was a really good performance. And so I was wondering, you were talking a bit earlier about the casting process. I was wondering if you could talk about how you found this actor, and also, I know you weren't the director, but if you could talk at all about how you got this performance out of the actor, I'd be curious to hear that.
I guess this is where transparency comes in. So Marquise Ransom, he's actually one of our producing partners. We worked with him on a couple of shorts before,
Oh,
and
interesting.
we went into this saying, okay, he's the lead actor. The reason why he looks confused or discombobulated in the film is because he really was. And he'll tell you that it's when I initially wrote the film and I was envisioning to direct it, I wanted to be a little bit darker. You know, I you know, look at life, you know, in the more a darker sense, you know, while the director wanted to make it a little lighter. You know, his
Okay.
creative choice was like, oh, hey, we can make it a little bit humorous. We can, you know, make it lighter. It can be on the path of, you know, Get Out. And I kind of
Okay.
wanted to stay away from that, just because, hey, it's Get Out. It's, you know, it already has the same elements, and I don't want to live up to something that people, you know, already loved or, you know, succeeded. I didn't want it to look like, hey, we were making another Get Out. So I wanted to make it as dark as possible, as gruesome. And I can send you over some stills from when I was about to direct it. So he knew my intention.
Okay.
But, you know, with, you know, the process of just making a film, I like to, you know, empower people, and I don't want to step on toes. So I pretty much gave the director the leeway to do, you know, what he saw fit creatively, just to make it more like collaboration, you know,
Yeah.
and make him feel like he was a part of the process, and it's not just me ghost directing. Like, I didn't want anybody to feel like I was over their shoulders. So
Okay.
there was a lot of things where Marquis struggled, like, okay, like, what am I doing? Like, what should I follow? What is the path?
Interesting.
Um, and in the end, it worked a little bit. Um,
Yeah,
And
I was thinking especially of the interview scene early on, where he's really sort of it almost seems drunk, with how confused and out of it he looks. I thought that performance was really captivating in that scene.
I'll definitely let him know because and I'm sure he'll appreciate it because I'm in a different place now, like we all are. But if and a lot of people tell me not to do this, but like I said, I can't help not to. I hate that film, you
Wait,
know, for the way that I intended it, it's not what it was.
interesting.
But our intention wasn't to make money off of this film. It wasn't to, become wildly successful. It was to create a film and show the powers to be that we know how to make a film for $20,000. And if I take everything else away, the fact that we made a film, it debuted on Peacock, it's on Tubi, Sling TV, Redbox, the Roku channel, etc., and it allowed us to make a few other films, then it's a success. So I can't really put the pressure on myself and the cast and crew to say we should have done better when I'm competing against films that have like millions of dollars.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, I'm sorry to hear that you don't like it. I enjoyed it. Um, and you said you were worried about it being compared to Get Out. That comparison didn't even occur to me. Um, in my mind, Get Out is very much about like being an outsider inside of a culture that you're not from. And I didn't really see those elements in By Deception. I saw it as a much more intimate film, small scale, with fewer characters and much more about a single person's emotions and thoughts. Um, and I mean, I now that you pointed out, I suppose I am able to come up with some similarities, but they hadn't occurred to me when I was watching it. Uh, so, you mentioned a moment ago that this allowed you to create some more films. I believe this is the only film of yours that I've seen. What are the other ones you were referring to?
Yeah, so we do have a home invasion thriller coming out called One Way Out,
Okay.
that I produced. Marquise actually directed. Uh, then we did a emotive drama called Second Chance City. That's also about to come out. And we did a romance drama. All three films are in like the tail end of like post production and will soon be released. But that's like as a filmmaker, that's all you can ask for is the opportunities to make another film and create. Genre wise, I think I lean more towards the horror and thriller genre. Just I feel like production quality you can do so much more. Um,
Yeah.
but we also wanted to make sure that we had a wide range of different genres just to see like what works, what resonates with people. And then because I like to think at the stage that we are, we're still learning. We're learning how to make a film. We're learning how to market it. We're learning to see what the audience likes, so then we can actually have our footing and move on from there.
Yeah. Yeah. If you so to clarify, when you said that this allowed you to create more films, does that mean that like you were able to take the profits from this and use them to fund further movies, or do you mean that it like opened up connections with other producers?
Yeah,
Or
the latter.
okay. That was
Yeah, we people saw By Deception. I let some see some screeners out, and some individuals like, oh hey, I would love to collaborate, with your production company on our next film, or hey, what other films do you have written that and that's how that kind of expanded from there.
yeah. Yeah. Okay. So tell me a bit about the marketing that you just mentioned. Uh, you said you've been learning about marketing while doing this. Marketing is frequently, especially for independent artists like this, it's frequently the most difficult part of any project. Uh, just because marketing is a different set of skills than the actual art form, and so being good at making movies do not guarantee that you're good at marketing movies. So I'm curious what sort of things you did and what sort of things you learned in that process.
That's where the learning aspect like really came from when we had initially, because By Deception was distributed by Homestead Entertainment, and I think a lot of independent or upcoming filmmakers believe once you make a film and you give it to a distributor, your job is done. And that is the furthest thing, especially in the independent world. Like, we're not giving a film to Universal or Sony or Warner or Netflix. It's, you make the film, and even if you hand it off, you still have to hit the ground running. You have to do, the interviews, you have to do the email blasts, you have to do the direct to consumer marketing. Um, and
Yeah.
I kind of found that out like later on in the process, where it's like, okay, well, this isn't really picking up the traction that, I initially wanted. Um, and like I said, I was in a dark place there, like, not liking your own film. So, and I don't want to be on social media or telling people, hey guys, go see my film, you're gonna love it. Like but I also realize as a filmmaker, it's not my job to love a film anymore. It's my job to market it. It's my job to promote it. It's my
Yeah.
job to have that open, discussion and, say, X, Y, and Z, this is why you should watch it, or, this is why you shouldn't. A lot of people, when they see it and they hear the budget, or when they hear like the trouble that go on set, it was like, oh wow, you guys did what you did, congrats to you. But yeah, marketing is such a huge, a huge component. And I think that was like, us being naive, which is why we jumped into a bunch of other projects after that. And you can't really do that in this indie space. You have to like pretty much like bleed it dry. You have to, there's no 12-day shoot. There's no, 3-6 months post. Like, if you're releasing a film, this is probably like a 2-3 year journey. And you have to, keep on pushing. You have to keep on finding ways to, engage, your audience. And, I had to learn that out the hard way. So it's like, now we're gonna do a little tie-in. So the next film is like I said, a home invasion thriller. So while we're gearing up to promote that, a little promotion is gonna be sprinkled of By Deception. It's like, this is what we've done. This is what's about to come out. And hopefully we can establish a brand of being, a good production company that provides, decent quality on a micro budget scale.
Yeah. Certainly in terms of just like technical quality. I mean, a lot of these days it's less common than it used to be, but certainly in the days of shot on video, on videotape, that is, there was a lot of like low budget films with crappy audio and crappy visuals. But this is all like crisp, clear, no difficulties in that regard. What sort of equipment did you use, like camera and microphone and all that?
Yeah, so camera wise, we shot with a Red Scarlet
Oh,
W.
wow.
Yeah. And that's a lot of things that I think when filmmakers, get on this journey, it's kind of see what resources you have around you, see who you can build and network with. And, that way, what you're putting out, you don't have to, suffer with the bare minimum. And we've been lucky to be able to, own and operate like our own, equipment. So it's that's what also gives us the opportunity to do things at a lower budget, as well as to do more and more content, because we own the equipment that we're shooting on. So we shot on a Red. Mic wise, it was a Sennheiser MKE 300. So we, for the most part, like low industry standard. And from there, we're just, looking to, build up. That's how I feel like the best way to build up a production company. Get the equipment and the people will come, and I'm never of the notion of like, hey, you got to do what I want to film. It's like, hey, we have the equipment. What do you want to film? And let's
Okay.
here and make it.
So you did buy all of that. You didn't rent it?
Yeah. So by deception, the DP and the director, he owned a Red. And for our films after that, we invested and we got our own Red and everything like that.
All right. Yeah, that's a high-end camera. Not the highest end, but certainly quite a bit nicer than a lot of other cameras that I've seen films shot on. Um, Interesting. So, to what degree do you think you being unsatisfied with By Deception is about, um, sorry, actually, let me back up for a moment. Is this your first feature?
This is the first feature that I was the lead producer, and the buck stopped with me. And I think
Okay.
that's why, I had the unreal expectations, or just like being unhappy in general.
Okay.
Because like other films, when you collaborate with others, and depending who the lead producer is or who the person in charge is, you know, it's up to their discretion. So this was like, hey, I'm betting on myself. This is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna prove everybody wrong that didn't listen to me. You put unreal expectations on your shoulders. You want to conquer the world. And then also, I have a background in entertainment. I used to do marketing and promotions for Def Jam. I wrote for the
Oh,
Source
cool.
magazine. I wrote and produced the entertainment series for AOL HuffPost. So it's like all these eyes are going to be looking at me, and I can't disappoint. So it was one of those things where the ambition was too high, and I just went into the process with like unrealistic expectations. It's like, oh, hey, let's make By Deception, and somebody's going to give us $1 million afterwards, and that's not the case.
Okay, so when you say your expectations were too high, do you mean in terms of what the reception to the film would be, or do you mean in terms of like the quality of the film itself?
More what I expected, just like that, outside, not general public, but more from like the Hollywood sense, you know,
Hmm.
because expectations in general, it wasn't monetary. That's why the budget was set at what it was. This is some spare stuff that we have available. Let's try to stay within this range. This is what can be done. We're not gonna make $1 million. And it's like, even though you're telling everybody that, your hope is for Netflix to see and say, oh my God, you guys did this for like 20,000. Here's a $5 million production deal to make 100 of these. And that's not how the industry works. Like
No.
they don't even want to make films for that low of a budget.
Yeah, yeah, that is curious. It's unfortunate. I recently interviewed Preston DeFrancis, the director of Ruin Me, which is on Shudder at the moment, and that episode hasn't gone live yet, but it will be live by the time this one goes live. And he was saying a similar thing, that he was really hoping that this, like, okay, I'm going to make a micro budget independent horror film. It's going to be critically acclaimed and commercially successful, and then Hollywood producers are going to notice me and give me a bigger budget. And that also didn't work out for him, even though Ruin Me is also, like, it is critically acclaimed and it is commercially successful, but it's not working that way. And so getting two examples of this so in such short succession is really making me wonder, like, does that work out for anybody? Um, Surely it must, because, like,
Yeah,
mainstream producers have to come from somewhere, but I guess the rate of it happening is pretty low.
well, one, it's like a 1% chance that I believe that can occur.
Okay.
And then two, I think as creatives, and I tend to put myself in this box. We're delusional. We think that everything we do is great. And I have filmmakers come to me or screenwriters and say, "Oh, my script is great," or this is great and that's great. It's almost like being the person on American Idol that can't sing, but their family tells them that they can, and we make a fool of ourselves on national TV. It's where's the checks and balances? Like now we have a system where we get script coverage. We do internal pitches with each others to make sure, like, these are the type of films that we're making. But sometimes it's like, oh, let's make a movie. We have equipment. Oh, and we have like this type of equipment. So of course, somebody's going to throw millions of dollars at us. And that's not how the world works, And
Yeah.
it's a lot of things that go into it, because sometimes great movies don't make money.
Yeah.
And sometimes not so great movies make a lot of money.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
I have if there's any movie opinion that I hold, it's that there's no correlation between the quality of a movie and how financially successful it is. A large part of what makes it successful is marketing, but also a large part of it is just random chance. So yeah, man. So you're continuing making independent films.
yes.
So tell me a bit about what you plan on doing differently next time.
Like I said, next time, and we're already starting to implement this. This is it's just more like checks and balances. Um,
Okay.
like when we write a script, whether it's me or whether it comes from like someone else or just an outside ecosystem, we're sending it out to like Blacklist, or we're sending it out to We Screenplay. And I did that with By Deception. Like, By Deception got a score of like a 4 from Blacklist, but they also said that they compared it to Gone Girl, just in like the toxicity of the relationship. And I was like, yes, that's what I was going for. I wanted to make a film similar to Gone Girl. You guys don't know what you're talking about. Great, boom, making a movie. But it's if you want to have that response, quote unquote, from like Hollywood, you have to kind of go through that process of seeing what outside people think about the project. You can't just send the script to an actor who 9 times out of 10 they're going to say yes to a script just because they want to be in a movie,
Right.
or to your family member who they have to be positive and supportive, because if they're not, it's going to start an argument.
Right.
So it's one of those things. You have to get that outside opinion, but you also have to make sure that you have a big sample size, because I can send somebody a script and they can say they don't like it, but if they say why they don't like it or what's not explained, then I know, okay, hey, I'm not doing a better job of hitting my beats or setting up the structure the right way and going from there. So it's just being a little bit more like diligent and realizing, hey, this is the recipe that we want to follow, but there is a recipe. Whereas By Deception, it was like, hey, we have some stuff in the house and we're hungry. Let's just like make a meal.
Okay, I like that metaphor. Okay, so script coverage, correct me if I'm wrong. What you mean by that is basically getting feedback on the script and how well it fits with. I think it's typically used in the context of like submitting a script to a production company and then the production company giving you feedback. Is that right?
Yeah, but this is more so like just an external service. Like I said, you can either go to Blacklist, you can go to We Screenplay. I know there are a few others out there, but for the most part, the people that's reading the screenplays, either they worked, at a production company, they're a fellow filmmaker. Um, it's one of those things that you're getting outside eyes from people that are in the industry or they want to be in the industry, and it's subjective. So if they like it, it's kind of like sending the script into a production company or a studio and having one of their low level people read the script and then pass it up the chain. So if you're not doing the right things at this process, then you're probably not going to get like the reaction that you want. um
Okay.
and like I said, it's like the internal process. Like, how does Netflix operate when they greenlight a project? From an independent standpoint, we have to do the same thing. Like, let's treat ourselves like we're already in the industry, so when it's time to get there, we already know what to do, and it's second nature to us, rather than saying, oh, I got a great idea, I'm going to make a movie.
Yeah. So, as someone who is trying to break into the more mainstream Hollywood industry, uh, I'm guessing that you are currently not a member of the WGEA. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. Uh, Given that there is a strike going on right now, is that um, restricting your current filmmaking activities? You're not.
Actually, no, not at all.
Okay.
We actually just submitted to get approval for a SAG micro budget agreement, and that just means, like, another $20,000, film that's about to go into production.
Right.
Um, but when it comes to the strikes, as unfortunate as they are, I think this is also a breeding ground that independent filmmakers can take advantage of. And hopefully it can show Hollywood that, you can spend, 20, 50, 100, half a million on a film, and it can still be successful. Because I think
Yeah.
the biggest problem with the system now is it's just so top heavy,
Yes. Oh my
it's
goodness.
and that's why, the comparisons, or just like, the system is broken. It's like you're not paying, people what they deserve, because you feel like, okay, for this to sell, I need this or I need that. So you're overpaying for that. And then it doesn't have, it's not getting the return you want. So it's like, oh, hey, we made a $3 million film and we lost money. So instead of saying, oh, let's make a $1 million film, it's like, oh, let's make a $50 million film to cover our losses. And
Yeah.
when you're in the streaming market, is not, like linear TV. So it's like you have to have content readily available 24/7,
Right.
which means more content. And if you're doing more content and it's more about quantity and not quality, the quality is going to suffer. And just because you throw money at something, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be good.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really wild seeing like two quite similar seeming movies uh with enormously different budgets. um like you mentioned Get Out earlier, which was a low budget film for a Hollywood movie at $4.5 million. But that's still like what, 200 uh times what you spent on this. And like visually they're not that different from each other. They both look crisp and clean, and none of them have huge explosions with 1,000 extras or anything like that. So they're both pretty realistic from a visual perspective. um so you mentioned you said something a moment ago that I wasn't quite clear whether you're saying that you had worked with SAG actors or
Oh, yeah, so yeah, we've worked with SAG actors.
okay.
We can continue to work with SAG actors. It's just pretty much we can't be associated with the bigger studios or
Of course.
streamers that are that there's currently a huge disagreement. But I understand both sides of it. I understand the side of saying, hey, you have to pay us more,
Yeah.
and I see the side of, hey, we can't pay you guys more because we're not making the money. But like I said, it's just you have to figure out how to spend the money. The fact that we had By Deception on Peacock, we had an opportunity to meet with like a major production company,
Right.
and they were very impressed with what we did, and they were talking about like working with us, on doing some stuff. But their lowest budget that they do is $3 million. And I'm like, hey, you give us $3 million, we're giving you guys 30 films. And they're like, no, we just want one. And for the life of me, and like I said, maybe I'm just in the micro budget space or just independent space, but it's like, don't you think you can do more, and like breed more up and coming, filmmakers on like a lower scale project or budget, rather than just like throwing all your money, and to them it's like $3 million. But why would it's kind of like, I understand it, but to me it doesn't make business sense, because that's how you go bankrupt.
Yeah. Um, I'm reminded of something that I read in Roger Corman's book, How I Made 100 Movies in Hollywood and Never Lost a Dime, where he talks about how he would, a production company would offer him a certain amount of money, and he would think, like, this is more money than I need in order to make a movie. And so what he would do is he would spend the money on, sets and crew and lights and everything. Uh, and then he would film what he needed for the production company in half the time and with half the budget of what they expected him to use, and then use the other half to film a completely separate movie that he owned the rights to. And so I think that would be I don't know if you can get away with that in the modern era, but I think that would be a great thing to see more of. I'd love to see independent producers take advantage of that sort of thing.
If you can, if anybody can, I suggest you do it. Like they say, one for them, one for you, because the route that this industry is going, especially like I said, from the top, it's gonna explode, and you see the constraints right now. There's no reason why half these films should be, being with 2 million, 200 million, $300 million budgets. It's not sustainable, and it's not, oh, hey, let's take a step back, let's scale down to lower budget projects. It's like, no, let's spend more money, and that's not going to be conducive to a healthy industry. But I think this now is the time. COVID was a good way as well, but I feel like now is definitely the time for the rise of like independent filmmakers to like take advantage, of what's going on.
Yeah, yeah, I'm fortunate in that I care a lot more about small independent films than I do about big mainstream films, because I agree that the big mainstream film industry really does look like it's in trouble. They've really not handled the transition to streaming in a way that has maintained their profits, but they've continued to put all of their eggs into fewer and fewer baskets, and each of those baskets is really big. And if to stretch the metaphor to the breaking point, if the handle breaks and all your eggs fall down, you're in a lot of trouble. All it takes is a few big flops to really put a studio in danger. And given how some of this summer's blockbusters have been doing, I think we're reaching that point. So yeah, I think you're completely right. And the thing that I see is that really makes me not worried about all of that is that I don't see it threatening independent film at all, because the big studios aren't funding small movies to the degree that they used to, and production value has gotten you can get so much for so little these days because technology has improved so much. Like
Exactly.
you were talking about using that red camera. And I'm reminded of this, reading about the history of film. So much of the budget of older movies went to the purchase of literal film, and that's just not a requirement anymore. So, yeah. So you've talked a bit about how you think mainstream films are in danger in the future. I'm curious if you could talk a bit more about how you see independent film changing and progressing in the coming years.
With the access to more, quote unquote, industry standard equipment, I feel like, better, because when people think about like indie films or Tubi movies, it's, oh my God, that's horrible. That's not gonna work. Um, but I feel like more independent filmmakers, and I think Tubi is actually like a perfect breeding ground for indie filmmakers because one, like I said, filmmakers are learning how to make films and they're getting feedback as well. So if I would love to see Tubi stay in that realm where, indie filmmakers just thrive, even if it's on a higher level, but a business is a business. And the fact that they're getting content from like HBO and bigger production companies and studios, Tubi's going to turn now into Amazon Prime Video, and the payouts are going to be lower and lower, which is already happening.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
And so now it's like there has to be another thing that comes up that can be that breeding ground for indie filmmakers. I would love to see like indie filmmakers, whether it's in a micro budget or low budget like space, come together and network across and like just pool resources. I think a lot of people should be doing that, whether it's like from a regional or local level. That way you can put more into a film and just take the egos out of it. Like if I'm like on By Deception, while I was the producer, I was doing like production assistant work, and half the time people didn't know like what my role was. So I feel like if you can take the ego out of the situation and build a great team or a great production, let's just say you could take like the top 10 filmmakers or talent from a city and they all come together to like agree on a film, that could be a great thing. And that's something that, we're, especially me, I'm looking to do. Just, peeking my head over and see what other, indie filmmakers are out there and, what resource I can be to them, whether that's, just some marketing tips or, pushing them to get some press or, if they're local, like I wouldn't mind saying like, yeah, if you have a project, you can use our equipment, because the idea for me is I like a particular style of like what I like doing. Recently I got, I met a filmmaker who did a film called Fontaine and the Vengeful Nun. And when I say that film was, straight like bonkers. His name's actually James Dean. It's like very like Quentin Tarantino-ish. It's like a nun that's out for revenge. That's like just killing and massacring people. And I would never make something like that, you know. But to be a part of like that world and just seeing and accepting it for what it was, like I pretty much told him like, hey, I believe like you're going to hell for even like attempting to make a movie like this. But I guess he said he didn't believe in that kind of hierarchy, so he was good. He's actually working on another film called XXX Mus, which is like Santa killing a bunch of porn stars.
Oh my goodness.
And it's just like things like that, like we would never like even decide, to make. but being a part of, productions that take you out of your comfort zone, like you learn
Hmm.
more and you see like what a market, can, what I mean, can do for you. And I think for filmmakers, sometimes we have to expand from being in a space where we're comfortable or we're doing whatever feels right. Um, so it's just keep on learning, keep on creating, and don't put the pressure on. Like, we're independent. We're not trying to go win an Oscar like right out the bat. And I think that's the biggest thing that those unrealistic expectations that we put on ourselves, it kind of like hampers us. Just wanting to make the perfect film and
Yeah.
no such thing.
Yeah, I think keeping expectations realistic is important. I think that with like a micro budget like you used for By Deception, uh, hoping to get $1 million out of it is pretty darn unlikely. And really, the thing that I think that independent filmmakers like that at that scale should be aiming for financially is to try to break even, which I think less than half of all indie films do. Most of the time, it's just ideally it's a passion project, and you can be satisfied with the art that you create, even if you're not satisfied financially. Uh, and so I'm really curious. Given that you said you were unsatisfied with with By Deception artistically, um what are you going to do differently on like that home invasion film that you mentioned or other upcoming projects in order to try to you know prevent that from happening again?
I think I think the biggest thing, and I think a lot of filmmakers can take away from this, is you can't expect everyone to have your vision, you know?
Okay.
And I think that was my problem. I wrote a script and I went into it thinking, oh, hey, this, it's just what you see on paper is what you're, gonna get. But if you give 10 directors the same script, you're gonna get 10 different films.
Hmm.
And I actually just emailed you over a still of the look, like that's from a test shoot that we were doing By Deception when I was gonna direct it. And like I said, I just wanted to take it, push the envelope, be a little darker.
Oh, wow.
People are, you know, different. People have different tastes. People like different things. People interpret things differently. Um,
Yeah. So
so
since this is a audio only podcast, I'll describe the image briefly. It is a still of character. There's a female character lying on the ground with like half of her face batched in, and somebody is standing over her holding a bloody rubber mallet. So much more explicit violence than we ended up with, which was what we ended up with was a much more sort of subtle psychological thriller in that regard. So I'm curious, like I don't remember a scene in the movie where this shot would have made sense. Was
so exactly. So with the movie, it was supposed to start out with a voiceover,
okay.
of a couple arguing about love and her saying, hey, I don't love you anymore. And then the husband, snapping. But
Okay.
that was David writing from his book. He was just reading an excerpt from his book.
Oh, okay. Okay. So
You
it's
know?
a
So this part of
right.
what you're seeing, that would have took place during that interview. You know
Oh, okay. We would have been cutting to a scene from the
exactly.
fictional novel within the film. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's always interesting. Um, yeah, so here's a question about that sort of like fictional, we can't quite tell what's true uh framing. I find that sometimes in movies where like we can't tell what's actually happening and there's sort of an unreliable narrator thing going on, although there isn't a literal narrator. Um, sometimes the result of that can be that it feels like there aren't any real stakes because we can never tell if anything that's happening is real or really matters. But I didn't feel that way with this. I felt like everything that was going on, even if the explanation for what was going on wasn't apparent, it still felt like everything was weighty and mattered. So I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about, like, is that an issue that you had in mind when writing this, that you purposefully avoided the possibility of things seeming unimportant because they might be fake?
No, so the intention was everything was real. And the biggest situation was you have a novelist who finds himself trapped in a terrifying reality. You know, and the
Right.
way I looked at it was like, could you imagine waking up to a former partner and they're dead in your bed or they're
Yeah.
dead in your bathroom and you don't know what to do? And in a moment of panic, you're thinking, hey, the best thing for me to do is get rid of the body because the police aren't going to believe me. But once you get rid of the body the first time, another body pops up and then another body pops up. And then you
Yeah.
start questioning, like, hey, what is going, am I doing this? You know, you're being, you know, entangled in a complex web of like deception and intrigue, and you're half losing your mind because it's like, am I really capable of like killing somebody? Why am I killing somebody? Okay, I'm not doing it, and the person that is doing it, like, why are they doing it? What did I do to them? And everything just spirals like out of control. And the one person that you're trying to keep all this, you know, catastrophe from ends up being, you know, the person that's responsible for it. So it was one of those things where it's, you know, the story just takes a dark and suspenseful turn, and the individuals that you trust are the ones that's responsible. So it's like, who can you really trust in this world?
Yeah. Did you write the log line that's on Tubi where it says a promising novelist finds himself becoming trapped in a terrifying reality as he reckons with the notion that a murderer may be in his midst? It,
Yes.
okay. Um, I found that interesting because I mean, that is this what's going on. There is a murderer in his midst, but it didn't seem to me like that was the thing that he was imagining most of the time. Like most of the time he was worried that either he was hallucinating the dead bodies or that he was killing people and not remembering it. Um, so I found the log line slightly misleading in that regard, uh, because to me the real like the thing that was scary was not the idea that, oh, there's a murderer here. The thing that was scary is, oh, I'm losing my mind. I can't tell what's real and what's actually happening, and I might not be in control of my own actions. Uh, and so that wasn't what I expected, given that I, reading that log line.
Yeah, so like I said, the original script, it was, you know, more bodies, more gruesomeness.
Okay.
Um, and it was, you know, more so David, you know, laying a certain trap to figure out, like, to catch this murderer.
Okay.
You know, where it's a situation. I know that I'm not doing these. I know I'm not capable of doing these things. So,
Yeah.
you know, while, you know, there are detectives that's closing in, I still have to figure out, you know, certain things that, you know, I can pretty much plan a trap to catch this individual and individuals. And there's little things that I drop throughout, like in the film, especially like certain conversations with Mark, where it's David starts piecing together, okay, like, hey, this person that I trust, something's off. And that kind of leads him down the line of, you know, laying his traps and putting certain pieces together and then figuring out who the murderer was. But like I said, like what was on paper and what we had the opportunity to film it didn't necessarily coincide. And
Right.
it was pretty much like, hey, let's just take, this duct tape and put these two things together and, just say, hey, it was a concussion that he had to wake up from. And, it was like either concussion or it was a dream that he was going to like wake up from to say, just to piece together a whole bunch of mess. And
Yeah. So, there was one part of the movie that that I wasn't sure how it was supposed to work within, the fictional universe of the film, which was when they show him, like a photograph of him proposing, to Ava. So within the story, was that photograph was that like photoshopped, or like how did that photo come into existence?
so that that part of the story, that's why he's concussed,
Right.
like he's in a concussion. So like in that fictional reality, it's what it is.
Okay.
So pretty much like when he drives to the interview, they never actually make it to the interview, which is why we did the loop at the end of them crashing into the tree. So everything that happened in between the movie didn't happen at all. It was just like a concussion type dream that he lived in.
Oh,
Yeah,
I didn't catch that at all. I
that
thought that
that was that was kind of
I assumed that was like just a deliberate trick that Ava played on him somehow.
no, yeah, that was like so that whole thing, 90% of the movie, he just imagined that in his fictional mind. And the
Oh,
way that I kind of look at things, especially just like how my mind works, I always think like the craziest thing, and it's kind of like sometimes your mind just takes you in dark, weird places, and you're like, hey, how did I even end up here? And that's what it was like. A writer would, come up with
yeah.
a scenario.
Yeah. I gotta say, one thing that I considered as a possibility, just because we seem to be having a moment about that culturally, is the idea of like alternate universes. I was wondering if like, oh, there, he has this accident and he wakes up in a different reality, and in this reality he's with Ava, and also maybe in this reality he's like, the version of him that he's replaced is a murderer, or something like that. But then, of course, that's not actually what was going on, uh, and so that's really, yeah, interesting.
Yeah,
Um,
the basic storyline was supposed to be that this woman that he's engaged to wants success for him so bad, and there also is like a level of jealousy, where she
right.
just wants him for herself, that she's willing to do the worst like the worst imaginable things for her lover to succeed in life.
So wait, were they engaged? I thought that was like something Ava made up, that she was like obsessed with him and he was actually engaged to that other lady.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like that's pretty much us like throwing stuff at a wall and seeing what stuck. But
Okay.
yes, he was engaged to the other lady in the film.
Okay.
In the script, he's engaged to Ava, who wants
Oh, okay. So that was a
success.
change that the director made.
Exactly. Like I said, we just had to come together and figure out like, how we can piece, like how much of the original story can stay, and then what else we can piece together to make it seem semi-coherent.
Okay. Yeah, I interpreted it as being that, his actual fiance was. I wish there'd been like a little bit of something about why his actual fiance was missing for like the central portion of the film. If she was either like on vacation or maybe like tied up in a closet somewhere that Ava had kidnapped her. Um, and then I interpreted Ava as being this like obsessive fan who was trying to worm her way into his life in a sort of like misery style thing almost. Um, and the bit at the beginning where she like insults his writing, I thought that was deliberate misdirection on her part. Um, and interesting. Well, I never would have guessed that there was so much. I'm not sure if conflict is the right word, but disagreement about how to take the story behind the scenes.
Yeah, like it was very intenseful, and it kind of just got out. Like I said, it kind of just got to the point of like you just have to finish a film, and let's just finish it.
Mhm.
You know, and truthfully, it took me 8 months to even like watch
Oh wow.
because I like to I had to pass it off to another editor, and Crystal Alexander, she did a wonderful job because she made sure that the film was watchable because I part everything that wasn't a part of the original script, and it just turned my stomach. But like I said, that's the learning aspect, and if we went into it being a little bit more intentional and better prepared, we probably would have got a different result. But overall, for what it is, like, it's still a success, in my eyes.
Yeah, I'm glad you consider it a success because I did when watching it. So
So I was disappointed so much in the film. And this is just me looking at the raw footage. This is nothing pieced together, but I'm just looking at individual moments and pieces.
right.
And $20,000 isn't a lot of money, but it is a lot of money.
For one person who's an ordinary person,
You
yeah,
know,
that's a hefty chunk of change.
so I thought I failed not only as a filmmaker, but also as a husband. Like,
Oh,
you're taking money outside of the house, and I felt like I just like burned $20,000. And like I said, I always commend my wife just for being supportive and like, you know, being here for me during like, this insane journey. But one day she gave me a, a small, like a chocolate edible.
okay.
And just the weight and, as much, pressure and anxiety that I put on myself, I went on this weird existential journey where I had the craziest reaction. And it was all rooted because I thought I failed with By Deception. I went on this like insane trip where, I thought I was a failure. I'm spinning out of control. Like I said, I have like, twin boys, and they come, I'm tweaking, and one comes over and smiles at me, and I'm like, oh, he smiles at me. He thinks I'm a funny dad. And then I start crying like, oh my God, he thinks I'm a joke. And
Oh no.
I'm I'm spinning out of control, and I feel like everything that I say, like I'm visualizing it, and if I don't say it, the words are like, getting stuck in my throat and I'm going to suffocate. Like I had to like talk myself, like I had to like remind myself how to breathe. And then, when I'm about to like get off of the trip, because I figured it out, I'm like, okay, I'm tripping, because my wife was like, oh,
Right.
she had one too. And I'm like, you don't feel anything? And she's like, no. So I'm thinking something's wrong with me. And
Oh
it's like,
no.
if you have one and you don't feel nothing, and I have one and I'm like about to die, it's like, oh, okay. So you did feel, you just didn't want to scare me. So now I'm telling her I have to like kill versions of myself so I
Oh
could
my
become
goodness.
normal again.
So you
And
could become what again?
normal, like just
Ah,
become
okay.
normal stuff. So when you said the thing about like the multiverse world of David, like I literally experienced that all because I put so much pressure on myself with By Deception. And after that experience, I'm like, one, I was happy to be alive because I thought I was gonna die. Like I felt hot, and I'm like, oh, I need air. I have to jump out the window to get the air, and I'm like, oh, if I jump out the window, I'll be able to fly. And I'm like, I don't want to fly because then I'm gonna land and crash and go to the hospital. And if I go to the hospital, I'm gonna like my mind is running a million miles a minute, and it's I'm pretty much experiencing like a weird, multiverse vision of who I am as like a creator and a writer. And
Jeez.
it was a dark place, and that's when I had to realize, like, yeah, you're putting way too much pressure on yourself, and that's not fair to you or like people around you, because I wouldn't mind going toe to toe with like certain films that's like out on Netflix that has like 100 times of the budget. It's just like, hey, you learn from what you do, and you go out and you do it again and you get better. And that's where we are now. But the worst case I could say, like I paid $20,000 for a crash course at film school. So
Yeah,
less
I'm
than what
glad you're
they're paying at USC. So
I'm glad you're keeping a positive attitude in regards to like um learning a lot from this.
yeah, that's the biggest thing that you have to do. Like I said, I'll always say that we put too much pressure on ourselves. We live in a culture where there's like instant consumption and there has to be instant gratitude. And it's not about that. As cliche as it sounds, it's more about the journey. Um, and let's see what happens from that.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on and talking with me about By Deception. Uh, as mentioned several times, it's available on Tubi right now. You also listed a bunch of other places that people could watch it. Um, you could say those again if you want. And also for your upcoming projects, should we keep an eye out for them on Tubi? Do you have social media you'd like us to take a look at?
Yeah, you can follow the production company on Instagram at Deck of Cards Media, spelled traditionally. Um, and yeah, we'll be having some upcoming films. We don't know where exactly they're gonna land yet, but Tubi most likely would be a good place. But we'll see what happens with those, and we're just gonna keep on making more films, and hopefully explore the darker realm of like certain genres a little bit more, so we can really hit the nail on the head.
Awesome. Maybe you'll get to use that blood-soaked mallet in a future movie.
That's the plan. That's the plan.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you again for coming on and talking with me.
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me. Definitely it's been a pleasure. And I look forward to listening to this and everything else you come out with.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Have a good one, man.
You too.